when this shelter volunteer was caught on camera, hitting a German shepherd with a wooden stick. She never expected what would follow. The shocking incident sparked outrage, but the unexpected consequences changed both their lives forever. This true story of redemption will make you question everything you thought you knew about second chances. The security camera footage was grainy, but unmistakable. A woman in her late 30s, blonde hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, stood inside a concrete kennel at the Riverside County Animal Shelter. In her hand was a wooden stick, actually a broken broom handle, and she was using it to strike the cowering German shepherd pressed against the back wall. "Get back!" Her voice was barely audible on the recording, but her body language communicated clear frustration and anger. The dog, a large male with a scarred muzzle and patchy fur, made no aggressive moves, simply tried to make himself smaller, his eyes wide with fear. Sandra Nichols, the shelter's overnight security guard, had discovered the footage during a routine review of the previous day's recordings. Her hands shook as she reached for the phone to call the shelter director. "Melissa," she said when the director answered, "you need to see this. Right now, within hours." The video had been shared with the shelter's board of directors and local animal control authorities. By the next day, carefully edited clips had leaked to social media, sparking immediate outrage. Thousands of comments demanded justice for the abused shepherd and punishment for the woman, quickly identified as Diane Peterson, a 3-year volunteer at the shelter. What the viral clips didn't show, however, was the 20 minutes before the incident. The timestamps on the full footage revealed that Diane had been attempting to clean the kennel of a dog known to be highly aggressive, a German shepherd who had already bitten 2 shelter workers and was scheduled for behavioral evaluation the following week. None of this context mattered in the court of public opinion. By day's end, Diane's name and personal information had been shared widely online. Threats poured into her social media accounts, her workplace, and eventually her home phone. "Animal abuser. How could you hit a defenseless dog? You deserve the same treatment." The barrage was relentless. Riverside Shelter issued a formal statement. "We are aware of the disturbing video involving a volunteer. This person has been immediately suspended pending investigation. Riverside County Animal Shelter has zero tolerance for any mistreatment of animals in our care." Inside her small apartment, Diane sat in stunned silence, watching her life unravel through the screen of her phone. After a decade working as an elementary school reading specialist and 3 years dedicating her weekends to the shelter, she was suddenly being portrayed as a monster. The German shepherd in question, known as Ranger according to his intake forms, had been brought to the shelter 3 weeks earlier. After being found chained in an abandoned property, his initial assessment noted extreme fear, aggression, and requires experienced handling. What no one knew at the time was that Ranger's story and Diane's were about to become intertwined in ways neither could have anticipated. As the public outrage intensified, a different perspective was forming among some of the shelter's professional staff. Dr. Marcus Rivera, the shelter's lead veterinarian, reviewed the complete footage with a more clinical eye. "That's not abuse," he said quietly to the shelter director. "That's fear. Look at her body language. She's terrified, but trying to do her job. This is a training failure, not deliberate cruelty." But his voice of reason came too late to stop the wheels already in motion. By morning, Diane would face both legal consequences and public condemnation, while the fate of Ranger, the German shepherd, hung in an uncertain balance that would soon take an unexpected turn. Diane awoke to pounding on her door at 7:15 a.m. Through the peephole, she saw 2 uniformed animal control officers standing in the hallway of her apartment building. "Miss Peterson, we need to speak with you regarding an incident at Riverside County Animal Shelter." The officers were professional but firm, as they explained that she was being charged with animal cruelty under county ordinance. The shelter had fired her from her volunteer position, and she was being issued a court summons for the following month. "I was trying to clean his kennel," Diane explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's bitten people before. I was scared." The female officer nodded without expression. "You'll have an opportunity to explain in court. In the meantime, you are prohibited from entering any animal shelter or rescue facility in the county." After they left, Diane called in sick to the elementary school where she taught. Her principal had already received dozens of emails demanding her termination. By noon, the school district had placed her on administrative leave, pending investigation. Across town, Dr. Rivera was conducting a thorough examination of Ranger. Despite the video incident, the German too, his fear responses are extreme. Dr. Rivera noted in his report, consistent with prolonged abuse. However, his aggression appears situational rather than temperamental. As one of the few staff members who had viewed the entire security footage, Dr. Rivera understood what others had missed. Diane had entered the kennel with food and cleaning supplies, not intending confrontation. When Ranger had lunged at her, she had used the broom handle defensively, not as a first resort. While public outrage continued to build online, a different conversation was taking place among the behavioral team. Ranger's scheduled euthanasia evaluation, originally routine for dogs with bite histories, had gained new scrutiny due to the viral incident. "We can't euthanize him now," the shelter director said pragmatically. "Not with all eyes on this case. We need alternatives." Dr. Rivera cleared his throat. "I might have one. My brother works with a rehabilitation specialist who focuses on severe trauma cases, dogs from fighting rings, abuse situations. She's had remarkable success. Would she take him? He is genuinely dangerous in his current state. I can ask." Dr. Rivera replied, already composing a text message. That afternoon, while Diane sat in her apartment watching her career and reputation disintegrate, Ranger was being carefully loaded into a specialized transport crate. His destination was Redemption Ridge, a secluded rehabilitation facility 2 hours outside the city. The facility's founder, Alexandra King, had a reputation for working with the most challenging cases, dogs that other rescues deemed too dangerous to rehabilitate. A former combat veteran with PTSD, she had discovered her calling after a service dog had aided her own recovery. "What's his story?" she asked when the transport arrived. Dr. Rivera handed her a tablet with a Ranger's complete file, including the unedited security footage from the incident. "Interesting," was all she said after watching. "And the volunteer, suspended, charged with cruelty, and being crucified online." Dr. Rivera replied grimly. Alexandra studied Ranger through the slats of the transport crate. The German shepherd stared back, his body tense but his eyes alert with something beyond simple fear. "2 victims," she murmured, "not one." While Diane faced the collapse of the life she had built, Ranger was beginning a journey toward rehabilitation that no one had anticipated. And the parallel paths of the woman labeled an abuser and the dog labeled dangerous were about to converge in ways that would challenge the community's rush to judgment. 1 month into his stay at Redemption Ridge, Ranger had made modest but meaningful progress. Alexandra's specialized approach, combining structured routine with gradual desensitization, had helped the German shepherd begin to distinguish between genuine threats and normal interactions. "He's still reactive," Alexandra explained during Dr. Rivera's follow-up visit. "But now it's a choice, not an automatic response. He's learning. He has options besides fight or flight." They watched through a one-way observation window as another staff member calmly moved around Ranger's specialized kennel, the dog tracking her movements with alert but not panicked attention. "What's your assessment of his long-term prospects?" Dr. Rivera asked. Alexandra considered the question carefully. "He'll never be a family pet in a conventional sense. Too much trauma, too deeply ingrained. But with the right person, someone who understands his triggers and respects his boundaries, he could have a good quality of life." Meanwhile, Diane Peterson's life had contracted to a painful minimum. She remained on administrative leave from her teaching position. Friends had distanced themselves, and she rarely left her apartment except for necessary errands. The court date for her animal cruelty charge loomed 2 weeks away. Her attorney, a public defender named Michael Soto, had reviewed the case with increasing frustration. "The complete video shows a very different story than what went viral," he told Diane during their preparation meeting. "You were defending yourself from a dog with a documented bite history. The shelter failed to train you properly or warn you adequately." Diane stared at her hands. "None of that matters. Everyone's already decided I'm a monster who beats animals." "Not everyone," Michael countered, sliding a document across the table. "Dr. Rivera has submitted an expert statement for your defense, and he's arranged for another expert witness, someone who specializes in canine aggression and shelter protocols." That expert was Alexandra King, who had agreed to testify about the larger context of the incident, how shelters often place volunteers in untenable positions with dangerous animals due to understaffing and inadequate training. What no one had yet told Diane was that Alexandra had a more unusual proposition in mind, one that would soon connect her directly with the German shepherd she had been demonized for confronting. The court hearing was brief but consequential, with expert testimony establishing that Diane had used the broom handle defensively after the dog lunged, and documentation of the shelter's failure to provide proper training or safety protocols. The judge dismissed the animal cruelty charge. While the court understands the public concern for animal welfare, the judge stated, the evidence does not support criminal charges in this matter. The respondent's actions, while unfortunate, were defensive rather than malicious. Outside the courthouse, a small group of protesters held signs condemning Diane despite the ruling. She slipped out a side entrance with Michael and Dr. Rivera, avoiding the cameras that had gathered at the main doors. What happens now? She asked hollowly. The school district still has me on leave. Everyone still thinks I'm an animal abuser. That's where I might have a proposition, Dr. Rivera said. There's someone you should meet. The following day, Diane found herself driving to Redemption Ridge, her stomach tight with anxiety. She had no idea why she had agreed to this meeting, except that after weeks of isolation, any purpose felt better than none. Alexandra King met her at the facility's main building, her handshake firm and assessing. Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy. Why am I here? Diane asked directly. To understand something important, Alexandra replied. About redemption, both canine and human. Alexandra led Diane to a small, comfortably furnished observation room with a large one-way window overlooking a training yard. Through the glass, Diane could see a familiar German shepherd, Ranger, moving through basic obedience exercises with a male trainer. That's him, Diane whispered, unconsciously stepping back from the window. Yes, Alexandra confirmed. He's been here for 6 weeks now. I wanted you to see his progress. Diane watched with a mixture of fear and fascination. The dog she remembered, lunging, snarling, terrifying, moved differently now, still alert, still watchful, but with a new focus and control. He's not cured, Alexandra explained. Noting Diane's expression, he'll always have trauma responses, but he's learning to manage them, to make choices instead of just reacting. Why show me this? Diane asked, turning away from the window. Is this supposed to make me feel better about what happened? About losing my job, my reputation, my whole life? Alexandra's expression remained neutral. No, it's to help you understand that a single moment doesn't define either of you. The public saw 10 seconds of interaction and made judgments about both your characters. Those judgments were incomplete for him, just as they were for you. The parallel struck Diane with unexpected force. Like Rangers, she had been defined by one reactive moment, one fear response caught on camera. Is that why the shelter sent me here? For some kind of object lesson? The shelter didn't send you, Alexandra corrected. I requested this meeting because I need your help. Diane laughed incredulously. My help? With what? With him, Alexandra nodded toward Ranger. He needs controlled exposure to the situations and environments that trigger his fear, including the shelter where the incident occurred. The realization of what Alexandra was suggesting hit Diane like a physical blow. You want me to work with him? The dog I supposedly abused. That's insane. Not work with him yet. Alexandra clarified. Just be part of his rehabilitation process. You're a known trigger for him. Under controlled circumstances, that's actually valuable for his progress. Diane shook her head in disbelief. Even if I wanted to, which I don't, I'm banned from the shelter. That's being reconsidered based on the court's findings. Alexandra replied. Doc Rivera is advocating for a restorative approach rather than a punitive one. Later that evening, back in her apartment, Diane found herself researching canine rehabilitation techniques. Her teacher's instincts awakened by this new form of education. The parallels between trauma-informed approaches for children and for damaged dogs were striking. Consistency, boundaries, patience, incremental challenges. She hadn't agreed to Alexandra's proposal, had in fact left Redemption Ridge convinced the idea was ludicrous. Yet something about the concept lingered in her mind. Both she and Ranger had been judged and condemned based on incomplete information. Both had reacted out of fear rather than malice. When Dr. Rivera called the following week with news that the shelter board had approved a modified volunteer reinstatement for her specifically to participate in Ranger's rehabilitation program, Diane surprised herself with her response. I'll consider it, she said quietly. but I need to understand exactly what would be involved. What neither Diane nor Dr. Rivera could have anticipated was how this unlikely partnership would evolve into something that would challenge and ultimately transform the shelter's entire approach to both animal and volunteer welfare. The first controlled interaction between Diane and Ranger took place in a secure training room at Redemption Ridge. Alexandra had designed a carefully structured introduction. Diane seated behind a partial barrier, Ranger on leash with his primary trainer at a safe distance. Remember, we're not trying to make you friends. Alexandra had explained during preparation, we're desensitizing both of you to each other's presence. Success today just means reduced stress responses, nothing more. Diane's heart pounded as Ranger entered the room. Though the German Shepherd immediately detected her presence, his head lifting, nostrils flaring, his reaction was nothing like the lunging aggression she remembered. He stiffened, watched her intently, but remained under his handler's control. Over the next hour, through a series of careful distance reductions and positive associations, both Diane and Rangers began to adjust to each other's presence. By session's end, they could be in the same room with 10 feet between them, neither showing extreme stress signals. That was remarkable progress, Alexandra noted during their debrief. For both of you, Diane found herself unexpectedly moved by the experience. He's so different here than he was at the shelter. Environment shapes behavior. For humans and animals, Alexandra replied. The shelter environment was triggering his trauma responses. Here, we've created a setting where he can feel secure enough to learn new responses. The supervised sessions continued twice weekly. Diane found herself increasingly invested in Ranger's progress, reading extensively about canine behavior and rehabilitation techniques between visits. Her educator's mind was engaged by the methodical training process, the clear protocols, the measurable progress. After 4 weeks of controlled interactions, Alexandra proposed the next step, having Diane accompany them back to Riverside Shelter for Ranger's first return visit since the incident. Are you sure that's wise? Diane asked, anxiety evident in her voice. For either of us, it's necessary for his full rehabilitation, Alexandra explained, and potentially healing for you as well, but only if you're ready. The shelter visit was carefully orchestrated, scheduled during closed hours with minimal staff present. Dr. Rivera met them at the service entrance, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes conveying support. The kennel area has been prepared as you requested, he told Alexandra, and the staff have been briefed. Diane felt a chill as they approached the kennel block where the incident had occurred. Ranger sensed her tension, his own posture becoming more alert as they moved through the familiar environment. But Alexandra's calm guidance kept both human and canine focused on the structured protocol they had practiced. The most powerful moment came when they paused outside the specific kennel where the confrontation had happened. Alexandra asked Diane to describe what she remembered feeling that day. Terrified, Diane admitted quietly. Cornered, like I had no good options. Alexandra nodded, then gestured toward Ranger. That's exactly what he was feeling too. Fear responses mirror each other, escalating in both species when neither feels they have safe choices. For the first time, Diane fully internalized that parallel, how her panic had matched and amplified Ranger's, creating a dangerous feedback loop that culminated in the moment caught on camera. As they completed the shelter visit without incident, Diane felt something shift within her. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding what had happened wasn't about a cruel human and a dangerous dog, but about two frightened beings trapped in a system that had failed them both. The real breakthrough, however, came unexpectedly during their 7th week of work together. While practicing leash walking in a controlled outdoor environment, a truck backfired loudly nearby. Ranger startled violently, and Diane, acting on newly developed instincts, immediately moved to create space rather than tension on the leash. The German Shepherd recovered quickly, looking to both Alexandra and, surprisingly, to Diane for reassurance. It was a small moment, unremarkable to an outside observer, but profound in its implications. Both had learned new responses to fear triggers. Both had begun to trust the process. if not yet fully each other. You're becoming quite skilled at reading his signals. Alexandra observed later. Have you considered what comes next for you? Professionally, Diane hesitated. Her teaching position remained in limbo, the district reluctant to reinstate someone associated with controversial viral content. Regardless of legal exoneration, I haven't thought that far ahead, she admitted. I'm just taking this one day at a time. Alexandra's next words would open a door neither of them had anticipated when this journey began. I'd both like you to consider joining our staff at Redemption Ridge, Alexandra said, her tone matter-of-fact, despite the surprising offer. Initially part-time, focusing on our educational outreach program. Your background in teaching, combined with your first-hand experience, would be valuable. Diane stared at her, speechless, after weeks of being defined by one mistake. Being valued for her skills and even her difficult experience was almost impossible to process. Why would you trust me with that? She finally asked, after everything that happened. Because you've demonstrated exactly what we try to teach about rehabilitation, that learning and growth happen when we create safe spaces to practice new responses, Alexandra replied. And because your story paired with Rangers is powerful, it illustrates something essential about both human and animal behavior that could help prevent similar incidents. Over the following month, Diane began dividing her time between continued work with Ranger and developing educational materials for Redemption Ridge's shelter volunteer training program. Drawing on her own experience, she created modules specifically addressing fear recognition, safe handling procedures, and appropriate responses to challenging animal behaviors. Ranger, meanwhile, continued his remarkable progress. Though he would never be a candidate for typical adoption, Alexandra had begun discussing the possibility of him becoming a permanent resident at Redemption Ridge, potentially working with the facility's more specialized programs for veterans with PTSD. The unexpected turning point came when local news station KRCW, which had initially covered the viral video incident, learned of the rehabilitation partnership. Reporter Vanessa Chen approached Dr. Rivera about doing a follow-up story, not focused on controversy, but on the innovative rehabilitation approach. It's an opportunity to reshape the narrative. Dr. Rivera told Diane during a careful discussion of the proposal, but only if you're comfortable with it. You're under no obligation. After considerable thought, Diane agreed to participate alongside Alexandra and Dr. Rivera. The resulting segment, Beyond the Viral Video, a story of rehabilitation and second chances, offered a thoughtful examination of both canine and human redemption. Viewer response was mixed, but predominantly positive. Comments praised the shelter's innovative approach to rehabilitation rather than punishment, and many expressed admiration for Diane's courage in facing her mistake and working toward resolution. 6 months after the incident that had nearly destroyed her life, Diane accepted a full-time position with Redemption Ridge, heading their newly established shelter education division. Her program, which included extensive volunteer training protocols and safety procedures, was being implemented at Riverside Shelter as a pilot program, with other regional shelters expressing interest. The most meaningful validation, however, came during a specialized training session with veterans participating in Redemption Ridge's PTSD program. Ranger, now a permanent resident with carefully managed responsibilities, was working with a former Marine who struggled with hypervigilance and anxiety. He reads my stress before I even know it's happening, the veteran explained to Diane, and he shows me how to work through it instead of just reacting. Watching Ranger demonstrate calm boundary setting, a skill the German Shepherd had once completely lacked, Diane felt the final pieces of her own healing fall into place. He's a better teacher than I am, she remarked to Alexandra, who had joined her for the observation. You both teach the same essential lesson, Alexandra replied, that a single moment of fear doesn't define what's possible afterward. 1 year to the day after the incident that had gone viral, Riverside County Animal Shelter hosted an open house to showcase its transformed volunteer training program. At the center of the event was a live demonstration of proper handling techniques for challenging animals, conducted jointly by a shelter staff and the team from Redemption Ridge. Diane, now recognized regionally for her work in shelter education, led the presentation alongside Dr. Rivera. Though she still occasionally encountered negative comments online, From those who remembered only the viral video, her professional reputation had been rebuilt on far stronger foundations. Today, we're demonstrating how to recognize stress signals before they escalate to fear responses. She explained to the gathered audience of shelter workers, volunteers, and community members, understanding these early warning signs is crucial for both human and animal safety. As if on cue, Ranger entered the demonstration area with Alexandra, his movement controlled but confident. A murmur went through the crowd. Many recognized the German Shepherd from the infamous video, though his appearance had transformed from the fearful, reactive animal they remembered. Some of you might recognize Ranger. Diane acknowledged directly. Our history together began with a fear response on both our parts, a moment that went viral and was judged harshly by many, including myself. What you're seeing today is the result of rehabilitation, rather than punishment for both of us. The demonstration proceeded, showing how proper training, equipment, and techniques could prevent dangerous situations from developing. Ranger participated as a training model, his behavior now predictable and managed, though Alexandra maintained careful control throughout. Most powerful was the side-by-side display of security footage. The original incident contrasted with current footage of Diane and Ranger working together in controlled training scenarios. The difference was stark and compelling. Our new volunteer training program has reduced staff injuries by 62% in its first 6 months. Dr. Rivera reported during the Q&A session, and our successful rehabilitation placements for challenging animals have increased by over 40%. After the formal presentation, as attendees mingled and explored information booths, a woman approached Diane privately. Her expression was hesitant, almost embarrassed. "I shared that video of you," she admitted. "I was one of the people calling for you to be fired, prosecuted, everything. I wanted to apologize. I never considered there might be more to the story."